Okay, welcome everybody. It's wonderful to have you here. These are monthly Thursday gatherings, similar to the Enneagram community of practice, just inviting authors and speakers and people with unique perspectives on the Enneagram to come and share their experience and their insights. And this one has a bit more of a conversational format, the Thursday one. And here we have Robert Hutchinson with us today. And I'm sure some of you know him, some of you don't. But Rob is an expert on Egyptian mythology and spirituality and cosmology. And I have spent many very, very happy hours with Rob, including in Egypt, having my mind completely blown apart by the insights that he has shared with me. So I wonder if, we can just share a little bit about your bio with us before you start, Rob, around what got you interested in Egyptology and Egyptian spirituality.
Yeah. I've always been interested in ancient wisdom and Joseph Campbell and looking around the world at different systems. I kind of got into spirituality through Buddhism. That was the kind of door that got me in. But I was really interested in more indigenous ancient wisdom. And I kept coming back to Egypt as the one that kind of resonated most strongly with me. I don't know why, but it did. And I kind of held off for a bit because I knew the Hollywood version of Egypt was just so wrong, and I didn't really have access to what I knew was or suspected was the real deal. So it took a while before I kind of found the right way in. I did some training with Annie Williams. I trained in Egyptian and Hermetic voice and sound healing with her, and that was when I started to get the right doorway into the right part of Egypt. And I kind of got frustrated with English and Greek translations of Egypt. Instinctively, I kind of knew there was something missing, there was something not quite right. And whenever I went to the original and when I went to hieroglyphs, there was so much more there. And it was just a much richer, deeper experience. So I started to go more and more to the original Egyptian, and that's when really the whole thing opened up and it all starts to sing and everything starts to make sense in just this beautiful 3D, HD, colorful way.
Amazing. Didn't you tell me that you were conceived in Egypt?
I wasn't conceived in Egypt. I was conceived in Zambia, but my parents were traveling back to the UK when my mother was pregnant with me. So my first visit to Egypt was actually as an embryo.
Oh, wow, amazing.
So yeah, so that's pretty amazing.
Just tell us a little bit more. What do you mean by right doorway? What does right doorway into something mean? I mean, I know for myself from an Enneagram perspective, certain doorways offer more depth and more resonance. Like, how did you know it was the right door?
And that was instinctive. But there's part of the Enneagram, which is Gurdjieff talks about you can understand anything with the Enneagram. And I found this reciprocal relationship between Enneagram and Egypt. So when they both kind of landed around the same time, and I started to learn more about Enneagram, and that helped me learn more about the original Egyptian, and that helped me learn more about Enneagram. So it's this symbiotic relationship between the two that just keeps on deepening. So it's a reciprocal relationship, and it's super important to me.
Yeah. So I'm sure we're going to hear some of the amazing things that you also downloaded when you were meditating in the King's Chamber in the pyramid. I remember that you did that when we were in Egypt.
Yeah, that was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah, amazing. So, yeah, take it away, Rob. Tell us what you want to talk to us about.
Yeah, okay. Well, just on that, starting on that in the pyramid, yeah, I had an experience of just the size wasn't very big. It was a sense of not being in something very big, and that's weird for being in the Great Pyramid. And somebody told me afterwards, they said it's quite normal that people have a dislocation of time, or they have a dislocation of space. So that's the one that I had when I was in there. So yeah, I've got some slides. Let me just let me do a share. I'll do this. With me. How do I do this? Sorry, bear with.
No worries.
No, it's not letting me do the share that I wanted to do.
Let me just make absolutely sure I've made you co-host.
Okay.
I'll make you host. How about that?
Yeah, see if that changes it.
So can you tell us more about that, though, while you're fiddling with the tech? Dislocation of time and space. That's a thing.
That was actually Russ Hudson told me that afterwards. He said that many people find some kind of I don't know, what's the right word? Perspective changes of either time or volume, 3D or 4D changes.
Amazing.
Okay, so just let me, the share isn't properly working for some reason. Let me do it differently. Let's try this.
And pause the recording in the meantime. Record again.
Okay, so you can see that all right, can you?
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, as well as being a coach and an Enneagram practitioner, I've always been interested in symbology. And I just find it really easy to understand through symbols. And initiates in the Egyptian universities, the mystery schools, they were taught everything. They were students in maths, geometry, physical sciences, philosophy, medicine, astronomy, music, and architecture as well. And my own first degree was a joint degree in physics and music. So both of which use a lot of symbology. And I also work across the duality of art and science. And then in my training, as I said, I worked with Annie Williams, and then also it's worth acknowledging Russ Hudson and B. Chestnut for their work in this area. So hopefully this is complementary to them, and we can add to the body of Enneagram knowledge. So this is really, Pesedjet's really a synthesis of a lot of work. So let's dive in and let's learn some Egyptian. So when is a god not a god? And let's start with this word, Netta, N-T-R. So we'll do a quick crash course in Egyptian hieroglyphs. The Egyptians wrote in consonants only. So it's a bit like Hebrew, it's the same. Hebrew is consonants, Egyptian is consonants only. So they didn't write in vowels. So we add the vowels in. So that's the ease. It's just for ease of pronunciation, basically. And we get this word Netta in Egyptian. It probably was pronounced something like Nuta, but for our purposes that we can use Netta. So I just want to know what English word might Netta sound like. Maybe pop in the chat or feel free to join in the conversation. Any idea what Netta might sound like? Maybe. I've got a very funny thing going on with my mouse, by the way. Can you read them out, Ingrid?
In chat.
Yeah.
Netta.
Never. Yeah. Anything else? Nothing else coming to you? Well, it's actually the root of the English word nature or nurture.
Wow.
And so for me, once I understood that, everything's, made a lot more sense. And Netta is one of the most clumsily translated words in Egyptian. And it really means a universal principle or a universal nature. So as soon as I started to realize this, that it starts to go deeper. And there are 4 ways of reading hieroglyphs. So we can read them in a British way. So the letters NTR. So we can read them in a way that's phonetic. We can read them in a way that the picture represents directly. It's a literal image of the word that's being described. Or it could be a symbolic connection with the word that's being described. And then there's this fourth way is more of an esoteric meaning behind the letters. So NTR there. We can read the N is the wavy line on the left. The T is the semicircle, and the R is it's actually a mouth there. So it's really easy actually to see what the esoteric meaning of these letters is. The waves are vibrations. The semicircle is a loaf of bread, or it could also be the primordial mound that manifested at the beginning of time in Egypt. And then R is the noise, air. That's a mouth. It could also be a string being plucked. So this word netta has got a hidden meaning of vibrations manifest consciousness. So we might be talking here about a lot more than nature or God. Our writing system isolates and it analyzes. And what's fascinating about the Egyptian hieroglyphs is that it uses the left brain for analysis and the right brain for symbology as well. So the effect of reading hieroglyphs is that we're using both sides of the brain. It's whole brain thinking. So you get a very different experience when you're reading hieroglyphs. So I was thinking we need to pay attention here. We're not talking about some kind of old man in the sky. We're talking about nature as God. So I was beginning to see how beautiful and important hieroglyphs are by going back to the original Egyptian sources. And this is just one word, Netta, written in hieroglyphs. It's a gateway into a beautiful understanding of the universe. So what does Gurdjieff say about nature? Well, he quotes these, he has these quotes. Hang on, I can't quite see my screen. So he says, everything in nature is connected and everything is alive. That sounds a bit more like nature and God. He talks of the duty of human beings to that nature which, strictly speaking, they owe their very existence. And then he says, nature formed us so that we could have enough energy to do both kinds of work. Ordinary life work and work on ourselves. So I wonder about that last quote. How does that land with you?
Let's stop for a sec. Seraphim,
Yeah.
the Deus Siva Natura. Say something about that, Seraphim, if you don't mind. What linkages are you making here?
Oh, it just reminded me of the philosopher Spinoza,
Yeah.
who in his work on ethics made a direct connection between God and nature. God, kind of a pantheistic. Some have said pantheistic, but really it was a panentheistic kind of conclusion that Spinoza came to.
That's the like naturalist monism.
Yeah, something like that. I think probably we would work it out today as being a kind of non-duality, but you know, because in Europe at the time, in you know, the 18th century, discourse probably wasn't ready for non-dual discourse, so they only spoke in terms of monism. But anyway, I was just making that connection between nature and God that I think Spinoza came to.
That's lovely. Rob,
And,
tell
and
us.
that's at the heart of, you know, you've always got that duality and non-duality in the Egyptian philosophy and the way that they looked at things. Everything was relational. The idea, idea of kind of individuality and disconnectedness, it just didn't exist in their worldview. And part of what brings me to this is that, you know, we're so disconnected. We've got a massive mental health crisis and we've got the climate emergency. We haven't got time right now to go to create our own stories. We're going to have to go back and pick up stories from the past, bring them up to date, not recreate the past, but to recreate or use them to inform the decisions and the choices that we make now.
Can you maybe make an explicit link to the Enneagram here? Because I know the Enneagram turns us towards non-dualism, that the virtues and the holy ideas are non-dual. Can you help us make the linkages now?
We're just about to go on and do that.
Okay, good. Thanks.
So yeah, absolutely. We'll go on and do that. There's a couple of people in the waiting room.
Oh, really? I can't see them right now. Let me see what's going on.
In the middle of my screen.
Oh, no, you have to let them in, Rob, because you host now.
Okay.
I'm
There's
unhosted. Should I
I'll
take back partial host status?
Yeah. My mouse isn't showing. I think it's because it's in presentation mode.
Okay, sorry, now I have to make you co-host again so you can reshare. Let's see what happened. What happens now?
Hang on.
Now I can let people in at least, but let's hope you can share again. Does it work?
Okay. Yeah, let's go. Let's go again.
So we choose between you sharing or letting people in.
Right.
Easy choice. Okay, let's go.
So yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier. This relationship between Enneagram and the original Egyptian, and how one informs the other, and by understanding one, we can better understand the other. So yeah, this is where we start. Why Pesedjet? Well, Enneagram's a combination of two Greek words, Ennea, 9, and gramma, drawing, Enneagram. So it does the job. It's a great word. It's a word that we know and love, but it's very kind of literal and Greek in the way that it describes the Enneagram. The way that Greeks thought was more rational, was more linear. What it doesn't do, or what it can't do in a way that the Egyptian does, is speak to the symbology of the Enneagram. And so here, Gurdjieff describes the Enneagram as the fundamental hieroglyph of a universal language. So that's interesting, isn't it? He's already using the word hieroglyph, and he's talking about a universal language. So we wonder what might the Enneagram be able to show us. And I was wondering, is there a word that we might be able to find in Egyptian that might better inform what the Enneagram is about? And of course, the answer is a resounding yes. And the interesting thing is it's in the first place and the most obvious place that we think to go and look. And it's this word Pesedjet, which is the Egyptian for number 9. So the hieroglyphs there are really interesting, really easy to read. The square is the P, the bent line is the S, and the snake is the J sound. It's just like we say judge or jury. So you've got the 3 letters that form Pesedjet there, PSJ. We add in the E's, so we've got Pesedjet, and this is the word for 9. And the 9 strokes after it are to qualify that we are actually talking about the number 9. So it's interesting, we've got 3 groups of 3 here, haven't we? So that's already saying more than Ennea would, the 9 bit of Enneagram. So I was wondering what else there might be around. And we get this word here, Pesedjet. We've got the same P, the square, the same S, the bent line, the same J, the snake. And then we've got this T, and we met the T earlier in Netta. It's the semicircle. And then we've got the same 9 strokes. So this is a group of 9. So the fact that an Egyptian has a specific word for group of 9 is remarkable in its own right. We have to say group of 9. They had a specific word for it, which is interesting. And then if you look now, a circle's appeared. So now we've got a circle and 3 groups of 3. So we're getting closer to something that might resemble or be connected to the Enneagram, right? And what is that circle? Well, if we look at the resources, the circle is the pupil of an eye. So we've got an association here, and this is the symbology of Egyptian thinking and writing. We've got symbology going on here. We've got the pupil of an eye, which links us to light and to sight and to insight. So this is interesting, isn't it, to explore a little bit further. And how do we know, by the way, that that's a pupil? We know it's a pupil because the word for pupil in Egyptian is Jefej. And that is written with the snake and the eye. So we've actually got part of the word there of eye, of pupil. And then there's a fourth way that we know this is right. If you imagine that eye as the circle as an eye, we've got the snake forming a lovely eyebrow around it. Can you see that? So we've got hieroglyphs working phonetically. We've got literal images. We've got symbolic images. And then we've got them working artistically like this as well, all at the same time. Such a rich and deep and beautiful language to learn. So Pesedjet, a group of 9. What else might there be? Well, we've got this word, Pesedjet. It's the same word, but it's written differently. And this is translated literally into English as Ennead. And it's a group of 9 natures. So Netta, nature, God. I'm always going to use the word nature rather than God in this presentation. So we're talking about a group of 9 natures here, and this word Pesedjet, written differently. And there's a huge amount of symbolism here. So we've got the circle now with a line on it. So we've got unity split into 2. So we've got duality in the middle line split into non-duality. Non-duality in the middle line split to duality in the bottom line. This is a symbol of unity being split into 2 halves. It's manifest being and potential being. And so what is this glyph? Well, if we look into the resources, this is a glyph for a half moon. So we've got the moon in light and we've got the moon in shadow. So we talk about light side and shadow side, don't we, in Enneagram? We've got it here symbolically. We saw the flag, meaning Netta. So we've got 3 flags here for 3, meaning God or nature 3 times. We've got the seated God to confirm what we're talking about, and then we've got the 3 strokes again. So we've got a circle here that talks about light and shadow, and we've got 3 groups of 3. Very similar to Enneagram, right? So what else could there be? Well, actually, there is more. And when I was looking at that circle with the line through it, it reminded me of my physics days. I studied physics and music at university. It reminded me of the theta from physics. So it does, yeah. This is theta, the Greek letter, which looks exactly like that half moon from Pesedjet. It'd be nice if we could find a link, wouldn't it? So I was looking at the Greek numerals, and in Greek letters, each Greek letter is associated with a number. It's exactly the same in Kabbalah, right? Every letter of the Hebrew alphabet is connected to a number. So if we look at the Greek numerals, and these are the numerals used by Pythagoras, look what's associated with number 9. We've got the theta symbol. Okay, so there's a few connections coming up here. We might be onto something that's interesting. And just to bring this full circle, that theta is like a capital theta. In written Greek, in cursive Greek, theta is written like this. So we've got the number 9. And of course, we use Arabic numbers. It's not inconceivable that through the Arabic route, they got to the same written symbol as through the cursive Greek. So we've got a direct line here from the number 9 in Egyptian through Pesedjet, through the moon symbol, to the symbol that we actually use today, we still use for number 9. So gets me thinking, what else could there be? Well, there's this idea of 9 bows. Pesedjet, again, same word. It's written differently. This is written with no letters, just the images of these 9 bows, and it's called Pesedjet. And the 9 bows is a really important idea in ancient Egypt. It represented the foreign nations of the world. And quite specifically, it represented the enemy nations of the world as well. And this version of Pesedjet is linked to this word here, pej, to stretch. So we've got a bow. We've got a bow that stretches. There's tension between 2 polarities. There's tension between 2 opposing forces. We've got a stretch and we've got a release. So we've got some nice imagery here around Pesedjet, stretch and release. All right. All from one word. And this is from Schwaller de Lubitsch. So René Schwaller de Lubitsch was a contemporary of Gurdjieff, a bit younger by a couple of decades, but he spent a lot of time in Luxor Temple, measuring every single rock, every single picture, every single carving, every single statue. And he came to very similar conclusions that Gurdjieff did around the law of 1, the law of 3, the law of 7. It's all in there. And he talks about the bow in Egypt as being the symbol of power that manifests as tension. And it's this tension in sap that causes germination in the springtime and in general, the thrust towards life. So we've got a nice analogy there with nature and life. And then he's talking about this necessity for tension, the need for tension to create life, to create change, and to create transformation. So we get to this. Structure, and remember the mantra that nothing in Egyptian is accidental and everything is symbolic. So it's a top line presentation today. We're not going to be able to go into the origin myth of Egypt and the individual natures, but suffice to say we can match them quite well. It looks like we've got the nine natures, the 9 virtues, associating with Pesedjet in the higher register, and the tension with the 9 foreigners, the 9 enemies on the lower register. And then we've got this nice tension between the lines and the wings across the Enneagram as well. So it's all kind of looking interesting. Is there anything else that we could look at? Well, I thought I'd share this piece of pharaonic wisdom for anybody who has work addiction. Here's some advice from 2,500 years ago. And this is advice from Pharaoh Ahmose II. He said, "They who have bows stretch them at such time as they wish to use them. And when they finished using them, they loosed them again. For if they were stretched tight, always they would break, so that the men would not be able to use them when they needed them. So also is the state of man. If he should always be in earnest and not relax himself for sport at the due time, he would either go mad or be stuck with stupor before he was aware. And knowing this well, I distribute a portion of the time to each of the two ways of living. So Farah here is talking about two ways of living, and Gurdjieff talked about two ways of applying ourselves to everyday life and improving ourselves. So at this point, wouldn't it be really nice if we could find a link between all of this and personality, personhood? And it's Egypt. Is there a link there? Of course there is. So here we go. And it's this word, Pesedjet, again, same word. It's the same letters. You know them already. The square P, the bent S, the snake for the J. And there's another symbol afterwards, which changes the meaning of the word. So what's this? Well, this is a midday sun with 3 rays. And this word means shine. It means shine, to shine, illumined or enlightened. And the sun there has 3 rays. So this is symbolizing the triunity that Gurdjieff talked about. We've got the unity of the circle, and then we've got the 3 rays coming off it. Remember, nothing's accidental in Egypt and everything's symbolic. And when we use the word ray, we're speaking Egyptian, because the Egyptian nature of the sun, the solar nature, the solar god, was called Ra or Ray. And it's exactly the same word that we're still using in English today to describe the ray of the sun. We also talk about radiate, don't we? Sun's rays radiate. We're speaking Egyptian when we do that. So symbolically as well, light separates truth from falsity. Under the midday sun, there's no shadow, there's only truth. And of course, this imagery is ubiquitous across the ancient world. So the statue on the right, on the left, is Horus, with a sun Ra above his head. This statue is one of the most beautiful works of art I've ever seen in my life. When I saw it in person, I was mesmerized by it, and the power and the energy of this work of art is phenomenal. It impacted me significantly, energetically, just being close to this. It's from Tutankhamun's collection, over 3,000 years old. This work of art. Then in the middle, you've obviously got the enlightened Buddha, and on the right, we've got Jesus of Nazareth. So this idea of enlightened, shining sun, it's all associated with the same word. So a bit of a recap here. We've got the Pesedjet, 9 natures. We had the word Pesej, 9. Pesedjet, a group of 9. Pesedjet, written in the way on the screen, is the Enneagram, the Ennead, a group of 9 natures. And then we've got this word Netta, which is, I translate as nature rather than God. NTR, vibrations manifest consciousness. And this is how a symbolic language works. So maybe we pause there. Have you got any questions, or is there anything in the chat?
I just wanted to ask Rob, what you said Gurdjieff spoke about 2 ways of living. Can you just talk about that a little bit, make the link?
Yeah, let me just go up to here. It was this quote from up here. Where is he? It was this one here. Nature forms us so that we could have enough money to do both kinds of work, ordinary life work, and work on ourselves. It strikes me as quite an important thing to be saying, that we have the energy to do both, and obviously there's an implication there that we need to be doing both. Is there anything else on that? It's in the chat.
Yeah, any questions? I was curious about why there are 3 of those little flag signs in the Ennead word. Can you?
Any other word?
That?
Yeah. No, there's no specific reason for that other than it's symbolic. Everything is there for a reason. What's important there is that we've got 3 groups of 3.
And I mean, just that idea of three of those, are they like 3 dimensions of being or something? If it's non-arbitrary, what does it mean?
Well, we can come to that. We can come to that a bit later. There are lots of different ways you can interpret all of this in lots of different ways. When we're working with the Egyptian, the hieroglyphs, we need to suspend our linear thinking. Everything's interconnected. Everything's symbolic. It's much broader way of writing things down. It's a much broader way of thinking and processing than our linear way that we read. Our language, the written language is very cumbersome. We just use a code of letters, and you have to know the right sound for the right letter. You decode the letter, you create a word. It's very cumbersome and it's very linear, and it doesn't allow for these beautiful symbolic connections that are here in the Egyptian.
Who's got questions or thoughts? Anything arising?
All right, so
Let's keep going.
yeah, sure. So that was the summary of where we're up to now. So let's also look at a concept. We've looked at some words. Let's look at a concept from Egypt, and how the Egyptian speaks more precisely and more broadly than the Greek. So this is the Greek phrase, know yourself, probably the most important 2 words in personal development, self-development, spiritual seeking. There's something about this that always didn't ring quite true for me, or felt awkward. It's written in the second person. It's you know yourself, and it's an imperative. It's a command. Know yourself. It doesn't really say much more. It doesn't say how to know yourself, and it doesn't say. It kind of it's actually quite shaming if you think about it. I don't know myself, so there's something wrong with me, and I don't know how to know myself. What's this know myself all about? Well, the Egyptians would never be that linear and that direct. The Egyptian always goes to a different level. So from the Rao Nupet Emheru, the Book of the Dead, we get this phrase, Rech em Ab'a. I know myself in my heart. Well, that lands really differently with me. I know myself in my heart. It's in the first person singular, and it's not telling anybody else what to do. It's such a gentler, richer, deeper way of saying the same thing, right? The Greek is talking about mindfulness. It's head, isn't it? Really, know yourself in your head. The Egyptians are very specific about knowing yourself in the heart. So yeah, as I said, everything in Egyptian starts to come alive as we start to look deeper into the Egyptian. I love language as well. So that the owl, the M, there's so many English words that start with M, hundreds of them actually. So Words like empower, what else is there? Embrace, embed. When we use any of these words in English, we're using the exact same grammatical construction as ancient Egypt. So there is so much Egyptian in English, it's quite amazing. And then the word heart is actually ab there. It can be pronounced ib. You can see it looks like a little jug above it. That's actually the heart. That word is more connected with a concept of the heart. So knowing myself in my heart, wisdom in the heart, heartful knowing, etc. So it's more like conceptual heart. There's another word for heart in Egyptian, and it's pronounced hearty. You almost couldn't make this up if you tried, really. And there are the hieroglyphs for it. And who thought Lionheart belonged to the Middle Ages? This is thousands of years beforehand. There you go, Lionheart. And the other thing to notice about this is those two strokes. Really important. The two strokes denote duality. So we're talking here about a kind of duality of heart, maybe the phases of the heart pumping. It has two phases. So we wouldn't know that if we didn't see those two strokes there representing connecting duality with the heart here. And the word heart is ubiquitous in Egyptian. They use it for all sorts of concepts to do with knowing, to do with connecting, etc. And we've lost sight of the importance of the heart center in the West. It relates to the right brain. It relates to emotions, our interconnectedness. It relates to the sacred feminine, the higher system that we're all part of. And all of this is currently being sidelined in our culture, whereas the heart, the right brain was all very central in Egyptian culture. So it's something that, you know, that we can bring back from those times, and that we're going to need to bring back at some point.
Can I ask a question here, Rob?
Yeah, of course.
So if the heart is so absolutely fundamental to Egyptian philosophy, how did it get lost in migration to the Greek philosophy?
Directly through the Greek. The Greeks invaded. The Egyptians kept the Greeks and other people out of their wisdom, their knowledge for thousands of years. And eventually the pressure from the outside world got so much. And the Greeks invaded Egypt. So what happened then was they kind of seized all the Egyptian wisdom, the knowledge, and they misinterpreted it. So it comes through the Greek, but it becomes more masculinized, if that's a word, and it becomes more logical. It becomes more linear through the Greek transmission and then Roman to us. So that's what actually happened was with the invasion of Egypt, the knowledge got misinterpreted. And that's what I'm saying about words like Netta. Netta gets translated as God, and it's not an adequate translation. And there's a lot of Egyptian that is mistranslated or doesn't really translate into a linear system or a very dual system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Let's hear from other people. How does it land for you when you hear, I know myself in my heart? Let's hear. Jill, I want to hear from you.
Oh, it's very beautiful to me that yeah, I somehow I'm kind of glad, because it moves me away from this area and it resonates here. So I love it. I think it's very powerful. So yeah.
It is. It's so lovely. So I mean, so different to know yourself. And even look how know yourself is written in that those straight line blocky letters. Even that is kind of assertive, isn't it? And then we get this lovely phrase in Egyptian. And the amount of Egyptian in English is just phenomenal. It's quite weird how the language, and you know, and I'm saying English there as well. I'm not, you know, this is because I speak English. I assume that there's nothing special about English. It's not especially linked to Egyptian in any way. So my assumption is that you would find similar connections in French or in German or Spanish or Italian.
Ma, you've got your hand up. Let's hear from Mohammed.
Yeah, hi everyone. Hi Ingrid. Hi Rob. I apologize for not having the camera on. I'm not in an appropriate setting right now, but I'm with you from the beginning. And if I may share a different maybe angle to the difference between know yourself and I know myself in my heart.
Yeah.
I'm thinking that actually know yourself, the English translation of the Greek form of the phrase, might actually be more impactful because of its ambiguity.
Okay.
Versus I know myself in my heart. And I'm talking here about the English translation, not the hieroglyphic itself.
Yeah.
Where now that it's specifying I know, which is in present tense, and in my heart, it's like, it's as if you are, the sentence or the translation might be offering people a quick answer to hinge on and allow themselves to answer, yeah, okay, I know myself in my heart. That's familiar, and I'm there. I know myself in my heart. But then they wouldn't do the work that would be forced by the ambiguity of the first phrase, of trying to understand what the word I actually means, what the word denotes, what the word know actually denotes, and what is really meant by heart here. So my point is that translating into English with the specific word heart allows us to misinterpret what heart was meant by in the Abba, in the hieroglyphic, versus the ambiguous Greek or the ambiguous English translation of the Greek forces you to think harder or do more work, or because they have no idea what it means. But if I tell you, I know myself in my heart, then my definition of what my heart means becomes my answer to that statement, even though my definition might have been mistaken all along. I'm not sure if I make any sense. I just try to grasp all that in.
Yeah. So if I understood what you were saying, and I think it's really important to say, yeah, this is an English translation. So by doing that, we're translating into our linear, direct, language.
Yeah.
For me, what I think this is saying is the heart is the seat of truth. It's the seat of our authenticity. That's what the Enneagram tells us. It's the seat of the virtues. So I think what the Egyptians are pointing to here is that seat of the self. For me, reading this, admittedly in the English, it's I know myself in my heart right now, and that changes. It's not set. It can change from moment to moment. It can change from day to day. It means that I'm present with my heart. It means that I'm present with myself in my heart. That's how I interpret it. I don't know if that's different to what you're saying.
To me, I agree with your interpretation. I think that is closer to probably what the meaning was.
Yeah.
We don't know we didn't live in ancient Egypt and we don't know exactly what they mean.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you study them enough and you study all their other texts, and then you link that to all of the spiritual schools, your interpretation right now, of course, makes sense and is probably the translation, or at least very close to what was meant. My only point was that it's, as you said, when we translate it into English and we start to use words that we have our own definitions of those words, we might miss what the speaker actually meant in ancient Egypt when they were trying to talk about the heart.
Yeah, of course. And unfortunately, we can't go back, and Egypt's gone, and we can't go and speak to them. We can't go and find out. I mean, it makes me weep to think about it. I would, if I could time travel, I would be back there in a second to ask them about all of this. And we have to work out our own interpretations with respect for them, of course. And I'm very passionate about we're not going to recreate ancient Egypt. We can't do that. But what we can do is bring things forward and interpret them as best we can, as you say, in the broader context of wisdom traditions and other spiritual traditions and the Enneagram, etc. That's the best we can do. Yeah.
I'm not going to take too much more time. Just like a few seconds here. There's this popular culture thing in Egypt and modern Egypt, of course. It's a joke where, like a comedy sketch, where someone is trying to tell someone to be better, to act, be better, do better. And they say nothing other than that. It's like, do better. And everybody's laughing. And the other guy in the sketch is laughing because what exactly should I do? And he keeps it ambiguous. So it reminds me of this know yourself. I'm not going to tell you if it's in your heart, your mind, your gut. I'm not going to tell you anything. I'm just going to keep it ambiguous. And we keep saying do better. And the other person keeps joking about I have no direction. Because if you give them some kind of indication, you risk that they hook onto their old definitions of what you just said, instead of forcing themselves to investigate something new. So that's what I meant by the ambiguity of know yourself versus a little specificity when you mentioned the heart. Other than that, I absolutely, of course, understand what you're trying to say, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, let's hear Jill, you've got your hand up, and then I want to hear Seraphim.
Yeah, Rob, I just wanted to, I remember attending a presentation with Teresa Daniels, and she explained, and I think I might have even remembered this from art history at school, where the heart is the part that's weighed in terms of judgment. I feel like this is the like this is the thing that makes it the thing.
Yeah.
Because if that's the thing that's weighed, it's not like your mind is weighed or your body, it's your heart. So it's a combination of everything that you've done and haven't done, and think and love and don't love. And so and if I can remember correctly, the picture that Teresa showed us was it's measured against a feather.
Yeah, it's on screen right now.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the weighing of the heart ceremony. Which happens at the end of life, and it's the heart that carries the personality. It's the heart that carries the quality or the measure of your thinking, your actions, and your feeling as well. And that's the heart on the left of the scales. There is measured against the feather of Mart on the right. And if the heart is light, then the heart balances out into equilibrium, into balance with the feather of Mart, and you can go forward into the next stage, or if the heart is too heavy, it's eaten by the animal on the far right. So yeah, it's very important, and we'll talk a bit more about Mart as well in a few minutes.
Brilliant.
Yeah, the heart is what the seat of personality that's measured. Absolutely.
Can we just take Seraphim's question or point and then move on a bit and loop
Yeah.
back? Manya, if you can just hold your point for a bit later so we can keep moving. Seraphim, what would you like to say?
So what I'm seeing is a kind of cultural dialogue in which you can see Gurdjieff's three forces at work. So if we take the Egyptian proposition, I know myself in the heart, and take that as the first force, and the response to that would be the responding force or second force of the Greek gnotheseaton, know thyself. What you have as a reconciling force in the history of culture is you have the arisal of the foundational perennial philosophy of the world, which is Neoplatonism. Neoplatonism was both Greek and Egyptian because it was based in Alexandria under Plotinus and others.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that Plotinus's fundamental work or magnum opus is called the Aeneid.
Of course,
And this work, the Aeneid, which represents a synthesis of that first Egyptian force centered in the heart and the kind of cognitive force of the Greeks, it synthesizes it and then goes and then kind of fertilizes and distributes this wisdom throughout all the great wisdom traditions that we know of in the West, namely Sufism, Kabbalah, and Christian mysticism. So what you have is this enormous kind of fertilization from the interaction of the first force of the Egyptian understanding of the knowledge, then the Greek understanding, and then that synthesized in Neoplatonism. And so you can see this in the perennial tradition all the way from India to the West. You see, for example, in the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, who makes it a central point that you have to put the mind in the heart if you're going to make this kind of non-dual realization. Gurdjieff, of course, talks about the harmonizing of the three centers, the thinking, the emotional, and the instinctive center. The desert fathers in the Philokalia, the Egyptian desert fathers, speak constantly of taking the nous, right? The nous has to be centered in the kardia, in the heart. So we can see how throughout the entire perennial philosophy, this great meeting of the Greek mind with the Egyptian heart has kind of informed the perennial tradition throughout all of history.
Super cool. Thanks, Seraphim. I love that, seeing kind of Neoplatonism as synthetic. But that beautiful, take the mind into the heart. Yeah, Rob, let's hear.
And of course, the Egyptian mind was super, super strong. The Egyptians, they were quite clear. The Greeks were quite clear that they took their philosophy, their science from the Egyptians. They revered the Egyptians. So the Egyptian mind was also incredibly strong. They built the pyramids, etc. They built this writing system of the hieroglyphs. It was their system of maths and algebra and geometry was phenomenal. So there is an argument that what came into Greece was really Egyptian. But anyway, and when we're talking about people like Plotinus, it's the end of the Egyptian civilization. It's right at the end. There's thousands of years before that. So, but yeah, the integration between all of them is so interesting to look at. So here we have true of heart. That's the weighing of the heart, and it brings us to this really beautiful concept in Egyptian of Ma Heru, true of voice. And it was the ultimate accolade in Egypt was for somebody to be called Ma Heru, true of voice. So, I'd be interested to know your experiences being a true of voice. When you are true of voice, what does it feel like? What's your experience of being true of voice? What's the content? What are you talking about when you feel true of voice? What's the tone of your voice? What's the intent of what you're talking about? What's the pace? What's the pitch? What's your voice doing? Because whatever's happening in our heart, we transmit through the voice. The voice is how we transmit everything. And the voice is how we transmit our truth. We transmit our past. We impact our future through the voice. So it's so important that we recognize we're not going to be true of voice all the time. But it's important that we recognize when we are true of voice and when we're not true of voice, and recognize what's the context, what's the environment of us being true of voice or not true of voice. But I don't know, has anyone got any thoughts about or an example of when they are true of voice?
Rob, this is so cool. Remember that thing we did with Hanali in 5D around speaking from the different centers?
Yeah, exactly. It's connected.
Karma exercise of, so if you have an idea that you want to tell people about or an initiative that you're kicking off, actually speak about it from your mind, then speak about it from your gut, then speak about it from your heart, and notice what happens to your voice, and notice the kinds of things that you say. And I've used that in strategy sessions and in team effectiveness sessions. I get the leader to talk about something and I say, okay, now stop and speak as if your voice is coming straight out of your heart, literally out of your chest. And the person's tone of voice changes, they emphasize different things, they connect differently. So, I mean, what you're saying is so spot on. I did the exercise today with a coaching client, like today. So say more about that, because we've done these processes.
Say more about which bit?
Just about what happens when you speak from different places in yourself and what is true of voice. Tell us more about what true of voice actually means.
Well, it's the transmission center. When we land in our heart, we have we're authentic, we're in truth. But that's an internal experience. The only way that we can externalize that is through this organ here. There's this transmitter here, which is so finely attuned to transmitting what we're experiencing. It transmits our state, it transmits our thinking, it transmits so much more than, you know, I think our verbal communication is 7% of what we're communicating. There's 93% is not the actual words that we're talking about. So our personality is transmitted through our voice. Personality is persona through sound. There's so much hidden in the words, the language, the grammar. It's so the universal language that you know, in the perennial philosophy, it's all hidden in the language we speak. Right. It's hidden in the hieroglyphs. It's hidden in the Egyptian. It's hidden in the English. It's all there. Heru, ma heru. We use the word heru in English. What English word sounds like heru? And here's a clue, it's connected to voices.
Choir.
Yeah, choir. When we say choir, we're speaking Egyptian.
And amazing. I would have approved of us using biometrics. Voice recognition. Did they say anything about the uniqueness of each person's voice?
Well, it is unique, and that's the work with Annie Williams. Is you can measure the tone in people's voice, and there's evidence that this is how they did a lot of medicine in ancient Egypt, was through voice, through toning, through missing tones. Missing tones represent a gap in personality, and they can also map it into physical ailments in the body. So there's evidence from Saqqara that is how is partly how the Egyptian medical system, which was very, very advanced, was connected with voice. So we get this true voice here.
Amazing. Wow, I'd love to explore this more.
Yeah. Manya's got her hand up.
Yeah, Manya.
Yeah, it's just a simple thing. Well, it depends, right? I'm thinking of remembering Gurdjieff, the little bit that I've read, where he's got, but it really struck me because, like Muhammad was saying earlier about history and looking through history, and history is actually a contemporary, it's like a modern way of looking at the world. But you're talking about language and about it being something that is repeated through different cultures and different languages. There's resonances. There's been a whole lot of that. And there's Gurdjieff having said that language got contaminated. That's what I'm remembering, is that he said language got contaminated, and that Armenian, at some point when he was writing, he said that had maintained its integrity as representative of what it was actually expressing. And, you know, there's just resonances for me in the question of truth and language and voice.
Yeah.
And how can we look at things accurately or not? You know, like we went through that whole period, like with Derrida or, you know, postmodernism, where we weren't representing something with language. And yet now we're going back to being able to do that, because that's what you're talking about. So that it's almost like we are then able to go through time, because time doesn't exist necessarily. You know, it's an epistemological construct or something, having history. So I'm wondering your thoughts. Yeah.
The way that my interpretation of that is, Gurdjieff was very, very specific about language, and the words we use, how we use them, they speak to our personality, they speak to our virtues, they speak to our vices, they speak to our to how we keep ourselves asleep. So that's what Gurdjieff was talking about. I seem to remember what you're saying about Armenian. What's interesting here is that we can't go back to Egyptian, and we don't know how they spoke, as in the verbal language. But what we do find here is a very different writing system. The most beautiful, the most sophisticated writing system that's ever been created, which we can read. You know, it's not 100%, but it's the amount of Egyptian hieroglyphs that are understood, and you know, they can be read at so many levels that, for me, it's almost like going back to Armenian. Going back to this written language opens up so much more color and richness and precision and clarity about keywords like voice. I mean, we've got Maharu here. We've got the line there, that's a symbol for half. You can't quite, I don't know if you can see, the top line is shorter than the bottom line. The Egyptians understood that in truth and justice, there isn't exact half. They understood that more female babies are born than male babies. They understood that there's more positive energy in the universe than negative energy. So this idea of half is just slightly offset. You've got the side there, cutting through falsity. You've got the arm, which represents force. You've got the circle with the lines in it is a sieve. So that's also sifting truth from false. And then you've got the R, we meant that before, that can represent unity. So you can read this literally, but you can also read behind the meaning of these symbols. They've got something to say about truth cutting through falsity there. And every single word you look at is the same. It's just, we've looked at a few words here today. When you look at more, it's absolutely phenomenal what you can find through going back to the original Egyptian. Should we look at some more?
Yes, please. Thank you. Carry on.
So this is a quote from Inayat Khan, who was an Indian musicologist and a Sufi teacher. He said, "The person who has found the keynote in their voice has found the keynote to their life." And while we're talking about him, he also says, you know, on this question of nature, he says, there's only one holy book, the sacred manuscript of nature, the only scripture which can enlighten the reader. So we've got these beautiful connections through Egypt, through Sufism, about nature, about music, and about the voice. So, should we go on? There's part 2. So we've got to go into some Hermeticism. Hermetic is a word that is definitely of Egyptian origin. The Egyptians called their country Kemet, so it might be linked to Hermeticism, as in Kemet. It could also be linked to Hermes in the Greek god, which is originally an Egyptian word, Herumes, meaning beloved Hermes. So in the Hermetics, we get the key principle, as above, so below. And that's the full quote from the Emerald Tablet. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. So this, in the way I look at things, this is the most insightful or the most important insight that humanity has ever had. And when we think back into ancient history, what did human beings have then that we don't have so much of now? Maybe put it in the chat. What did human beings used to have a lot of, and we don't seem to have much of it now? Ingrid, can you maybe read them out? I can't access the chat.
Connection to nature, time, presence, space and time.
Yeah, bang on.
They
had time.
Silence.
Pardon?
Silence.
Yeah. Yes, they did. So all of that, yeah. And I don't think we think about how much time that ancient people had in their own life. It's estimated that human beings could not survive, but lived on 4 hours of work a day. They had huge amounts of time, and then across multiple lifespans, across tens of thousands of years, humans had vast amount of time that we can't even imagine. And yes, they were embedded in nature. They were embedded in a pristine nature that wasn't polluted. There were animals on a scale that we can't even imagine. So they had time and they were embedded in nature. And what did they do with that? They watched, they observed, they noticed. And they came up with this absolutely genius logic that whatever I'm seeing in the world around me, the laws that drive that natural world that I'm embedded in and that I'm seeing, they must apply on a higher level as well. And those laws that apply on a higher level, at a universal level, must apply down here. They must be the same set of laws. And they must apply within me as a human being as well. So we get this genius logic of as above, so below. The macrocosm up there is the science or the laws and the principles of the universe. And the microcosm here is my personal laws, my personal nature, and they must all be the same. And that's really where we get to, where this comes from, as above, so below. So we get this, all natures that operate in the universe are all active and operational in a human being. And Gurdjieff speaks to this. Gurdjieff says, we have in us the matter of all other worlds. Man is, in the full sense of the term, a miniature universe. In him are all the matters of which the universe consists. So the universal natures are the human natures. And that's what we're talking about with Enneagram. Enneagram helps us understand everything. It helps us understand how the universe works, and it helps us understand how we work as mini universes. And that's what leads to genuine transformation So here we come back to the Enneagram, the law of three. We've already talked about the law of three. Looking at it slightly differently here is that the 9 is the balance point. The Enneagram is a universal symbol of the universal language, and I think when we can get distracted by personality typing and psychometrics and everything. It's all fascinating and interesting, but looking at the symbol, there's a lot more to Enneagram than psychometrics. As a symbol, it's a universal symbol of the universal language, and 9 is the balance point. Everything hangs off the 9 in the Enneagram, and we have the right side, which is the synthesizing side. We have the left side, which is the analyzing side. We have the right side is the feminine side. Not talking about gender here, we're talking about energy. The left side is the masculine side. So we have synthesizing and we have analyzing, but it all hangs off the 9. And that's really important with the ancient Egyptian idea of Ma'at. Is there any questions about that? No. So let's have a look at these 3 functional natures. So we haven't got time to go, as there are lots of different natures. Structural natures, personal natures, but let's look at these 3 functional natures of from ancient Egypt, and we can see this connection now with the structure, the law of 3, and the structure of 3 in the Enneagram. So Ma'at is the nature of balance. It's the nature of harmony, of order. Ma'at is the laws of the universe. And we can see justice. It looks like type 8. Harmony looks like type 9. Order looks like type 1. It's a pretty close fit there for what's going on in what we call the body center in human beings. Ma'at was the guiding principle of ancient Egypt. Everything operated in order to keep balance, to keep harmony. Our guiding principle seems to be progress, and it's never defined. Progress towards what? Progress towards living forever, or progress towards escaping planet Earth to go and live on another planet, or we don't define what this progress is towards, and all of that is those notions are just crazy notions, whereas Egyptians worked to keep Ma'at. And I think this is the key principle that we need to bring forward now. If we're not living in equilibrium, if we're not living in sustainably with the planet, look what's happening right now around the world. So Ma'at means equation. It's actually where the word mathematics comes from. So when we say mathematics, we're talking Egyptian, we're talking Ma'at. And it relates to the truth as well. So nature seeks Ma'at, and our mind-body system seeks Ma'at. It's pretty important concept there. And Ma'at is the guiding principle of the Enneagram. The Enneagram is Ma'at. And then we can look at this next one down is Jehuti. It's also known as Thoth. Again, when we talk about Thoth, it's just a Greek word. And even when we use Jehuti, the Egyptian word, we don't recognize the full meaning. But do you remember those 2 strokes from the word Hati previously? It denotes duality. So what the Egyptians seem to be saying here is that intellect on this level that we're talking about, intelligence on this level, is about duality. And it relates to knowledge, problems, and solutions. Well, we've got Enneagram 5, 6, and 7 there. And then we've got Hathor, Heteru in Egyptian. She's the goddess of love, nurturing, excellence, and beauty. So we get this really perfect fit with these three functional natures of Egypt. We get Mart, balance, we get Jehuti, intellect, intelligence at six, the head center, and then we get Heteru, love, in the heart center. As above, so below. As below, so above. It's the same principles, it's the same laws that are working in us. They're working in the universe, but without Mart, without balance, without harmony, or a seeking towards harmony, the rest of the whole system doesn't work. It falls apart. Anything about that, Ingrid?
It's completely mind-blowing. And what's just so apparent to me is that there's a process theology here. It's not as above, so below, as some kind of abstracted snapshot of a static nature.
Yeah.
But everything's in process. That just hit me. And I'm just wondering, Seraphim has a question here. What is the Egyptian word or concept for wisdom, Sophia, or gnosis?
So it's Sa or Sia, and it's where our word it's where the Latin word sapiens comes from. So when we're using words that begin with SA around knowledge or wisdom, where we're using the Egyptian word. And again, Egyptians would be very clear between dual knowledge and wisdom and non-dual knowledge and wisdom as well. But it's in the heart. That's the seat of wisdom, would be in the heart, and it's the word Sa in Egyptian.
Anything you want to ask more about that, Seraphim? What's behind your question and the etymology of the word? Is there anything you want to ask?
No, that's wonderful. I have always understood Maat to be connected somehow with the notion of Sophia or wisdom, but I wasn't familiar with the Egyptian term.
Oh, it is. You're right as well. It's really important to say that this is a non-dual system. So this is a representation. So Mart is also connected with wisdom, as is Jehuti, as is Heteru. So again, it's seeing the whole and seeing the pieces of the whole, but as part of the whole. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Mart is connected with wisdom as well. It's a very different way of thinking in Egyptian, because everything can be variable and everything can change, and it's not, they don't pin things down in the way that we do. So you can have wisdom at Mart, you can have wisdom of Jehuti, we can have wisdom of Heteru, and they're all the same. It's a very different thinking process.
Have you linked it to McGilchrist, Robert?
Yes, 100%.
Say some more about that, because to me it's so striking that what we've got here is the bilateral communication is going on. We're not taking an abstracted view.
Yeah, that's this slide here. The right brain is the synthesizing brain. It's the whole. It looks at the complete. That's why it's got the plus sign. The left brain is the brain that reduces. It cuts into parts. And then it analyzes the pieces in relation to each other. It's here in the Jehuti. It's there with the duality on the left side here. It's absolutely, that was when I read that book. It's absolutely here in the Egyptian, and how they seem to have known about right brain and left brain.
Yeah.
They seem to have known that left brain can't exist without the right brain. That the right brain needs to be the superior, if you like, of the two.
Yes.
And then they kind of counted against living in this left brain world that we live in.
Yes.
And that's back to the question about, you know, the how things got degenerated. Was it went through Greek, and suddenly we start to downplay the feminine, the right brain, in favor of the left brain, the analytical, and it comes through Roman thinking to us. So it's absolutely 100% in alignment. In
So I'm
fact,
just
quite
putting that book in the chat. Ian McGilchrist wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary, speaking about how, you know, the overuse of the left brain is basically what has put us in this massive crisis, disembedding us from nature and alienating us from ourselves. So absolutely highly recommend that book. It's a more kind of scientific perspective on everything we're seeing here. Cool, thanks, Rob.
And you know, so my dream is that, you know, we, as I said, we're not going to recreate any of this, you know, in any kind of, you know, Hollywood fashion. But this wisdom, this knowledge is there, and it's survived, and we can make use of it, and we can reinvent it for our modern times. And that's, I think, one of the key messages that I want to get across is we don't want to go back. It was a different era, a completely different era. It's gone, it's over forever. But this wisdom, this knowledge is there. We need to urgently make changes. We need to urgently deploy the right brain, the het heru, and we can do a lot worse than going back to look at the original Egyptian for hints, for clues, for ideas about how we might go about doing that and what that looks like. You know, just to pick up on that point about thinking as well, it's what this has done is completely retrained my thinking. That has just been such a gift of all of this work, is to use linear thinking when it makes sense, and when it's the, you know, to do maths or algebra or adding, but adding up. But there's also this other way of thinking, which is holistically and symbolically, and we can learn so much from the way that they did this. So we're hardwired for balance. Our bodies are hardwired for balance. Homeostasis is in the body. When our body goes out of balance, we don't live anymore. When our Enneagram gets out of balance, we fall asleep. We fall into our vices and our defense mechanisms. The Enneagram is an invitation to balance. The Enneagram is all about balance, and I think sometimes that message can get missed. Is our body in tune or out of tune? And isn't it interesting how we use musical language? Are we resonating? Are we not resonating? Are we in harmony? Are we not in harmony? Are we in harmony with the planet? Is the planet in tune or out of tune? The Enneagram and the Enneagram is obviously connected with music and the octave and the musical scale. It all comes together in this beautiful synthesis here. We're out of tune with the planet. We're not resonating with nature. That has to change, and it can change. And there's a positive message here. There's potential here for looking at all of this and looking at ourselves, looking at our place in the universe in a different light. That's what really motivates me, and that's what excites me about this work.
Yeah, thank you. That's so amazing. And even in the trauma literature, you know, the key thing around misattunement is what causes our trauma, our early relational trauma arising from, you know, not having anybody who's attuned to us, who's recognizing who we are, who's resonating with our being. So I love these metaphors. And I wondered, is there time for a question? I wanted to ask Sam to reflect, because Sam does so much work that I find so deeply resonant with what you're saying around the kind of embeddedness and process and nature and the archetypes. I mean, is that okay? Rob?
It's if that's okay with Rob, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm very excited about talking to Rob about this. There were some amazing coincidences that appeared for me, because one of the modalities that I get very excited about is soul collage, which was created by a woman called Sina Frost, who was a Jungian. And she actually uses Netta.
Yeah.
So when Rob started talking about Nettas, my ears were really kind of pricking up, because she uses that to create a context for a creative space where intuitive collage can happen. And these intuitive collages are kind of the way that we can offer ourselves resonant imagery that speaks to us on a deep level. And she calls each of these energies that we put on these collages nettas. So listening to Rob on Netta as nature, but also having this sacred aspect of nature, it just filled my heart with that kind of thing you get when you see all these kind of cross pollinations happening across systems of meaning making. So actually, I haven't worked it all through in terms of reflecting, but I'm very excited to catch up with Rob afterwards and try and join some of the dots, because that's definitely a right-brained modality that's very much about correspondence with the natural world, with the imagery around us, with meaning making, with finding ourselves within the outside. I mean, just, yeah, it's interconnected, and I haven't got very good language for it at this time of the day, but I'm very excited. Thanks, Rob, for being inspiring.
I can't wait to speak about it.
Good. And when Seraphim says something about, we've heard about the law of creation, law of three, and this wonderful discussion. Can you say anything about the law of process, the 7?
Yeah. That, I mean, that's in the obviously in the Hermetic principles. The law of 7 is, if we go back to, where was it? I mean, it's here. It's this one here, the law of vibrations. It's the N in the Netta, the vibrations here. That's the law of 7 in the esoteric meaning behind the. You know, you can go to Laird Scranton wrote an amazing book about the quantum physics behind the Egyptians and the Dogon in Africa. It's absolutely mind-blowing how there's a quantum physics equivalence. This is what I was kind of hinting at actually when I was talking about this esoteric meaning, and how we can see this one is quite straightforward. Vibrations manifest consciousness. There's a whole what's the word I'm looking for? Rabbit hole to go down here of physics and quantum physics, and what the Egyptians may or may not have known, and what may or may not have been hidden in the language. But we'd be here all night to talk about that. I would love to, but maybe another time. But yeah, it's in there. There's a slide I haven't shown. The slide I wasn't going to share, but they're here. The law of 1 is the Hermetic principle of the all. We see the circle all over the place in Egypt. We see the law of 3. It's the principle of polarity. Polarity can't exist without the reconciling force, and we see the triangle, of course, in the pyramids. And then the law of 7 is the hexad. It's the principle of vibration. And Russ Hudson showed this picture, amazing papyrus. I was so excited to see this in the Cairo Museum. On the left, you've got the symbol for houses. You've got 3 houses. You've got 3 snakes coming out of the houses into a chaotic snake. So that's kind of chaos. And then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 standing gods. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sitting gods. You've got more of the chaos, the upper snake of chaos. And then you've got Ra, Hepa Ra, unity there on his barge on top of the snakes. And you've got Osiris and Isis at the end. And then if anyone's been to the Temple of Luxor, and you've been in the nave of the Temple of Luxor, then you've been standing in the Enneagram. You look at this is the nave here. You've got one space, unity. You've got it divided into 3 spaces by 7 pairs of columns. So if you go to the Temple of Luxor and stand in the nave there, you're standing in the law of 1, 3, and 7. So you can find it in Egypt literally and symbolically. So there's just a few more quotes to conclude with. And here's Gurdjieff again on nature. I think it's so important. A change in the nature of knowledge is possible, but only with a change in the nature of being. So he's talking very, very clearly there about the work, isn't he? And he says man is part of nature, and man is part of nature and not the conqueror of nature outside of himself. So just this notion of conquering nature is so crazy. We're part of nature. It's our only life support system in outer space. And the invitation here is to work on the nature inside us, the human natures inside us, and not try and conquer this ridiculous idea of conquering nature outside of ourselves. We are nature. We're one and the same. You're going to say something, Fred?
Also that you mentioned, Rob, the quantum physics Egypt. Who is that?
The author is called Laird Scranton. Or Scruton. Oh, sorry, I would have to look at Laird Scranton or Laird Scruton.
Okay.
Can you
have a book title so people can just go and see
Symbology? It's the Symbology of the Dogon, or the Science of the Dogon. So
cool.
Sorry, I can't remember it.
Cool, thanks.
But yeah, he goes into all of that in great detail. And here's Gurdjieff. Sorry, go on.
I was going to ask you if when we're in Egypt in January, you're going to give a tour around the museum for 3 days.
Quite happily. With pleasure. Although which one now? There's 2. There's the new one and the old one. But yeah, Gurdjieff here saying everything is dependent on everything else. Everything is connected and nothing is separate. So we're talking again about this non-duality and this interconnectedness. Joseph Campbell, the old teachers knew what they were saying. Once we've learned to read again their symbolic language, it requires no more than the talent of an anthologist to let their teaching be heard. So they were talking about hearing as well. This comes up time and time again, that they knew what they were talking about. And we've lost our way right now. So we have to go back to finding out what these messages were, either directly when we understand them directly, or when we don't have direct access to them, then we have to interpret them as best we can, given where we are now and what we know about different cultures. So that's hearing, and then here is seeing. We've got the Eye of Horus. Again, this is the Eye of Horus represents well-being, healing, and protection, and it's the left eye. If you turn it around so it fits on your face, you'll see this is the left eye, which corresponds to the right brain, of course. So the all-seeing Eye of Horus corresponds to the right brain. They knew what they were talking about. The initiates in the schools, they were taught to open their eyes and see, and that's my purpose with Pesedjet, is to help people remember themselves through the Enneagram and also through these original teachings. And the universal language is hidden in plain sight, and that's what's amazing to me. It's hidden in the English, it's hidden in the Egyptian, it's hidden in the hieroglyphs. We just have to go and stop thinking in our Western way and being so analytical about it. And we have to open our eyes and our ears to the symbology and the rich interconnectedness of the Egyptian. It's all there in front of us to see. So we've got the wisdom of the ancients coming back to life. And then really just, I mean, we've already talked about it, really. You know, we can draw on the ancient wisdom, we can draw on Egypt and the ancient wisdom to inform our own journey of transformation with the Enneagram. In personal work, we're working on exactly the same natures in ourselves as are running the universe. And when we understand that, it makes it easier. And this myth of linear evolution through time to now is just that, a myth. We're so technically advanced, but we're so psychologically backward. Psychologically and spiritually, 2,000 years ago, is far more advanced than we were. Imagine when you had the Library of Alexandria, and you could go and you could look at all the ancient teachings. You could just go and read Plato. You could go and read Pythagoras. You could go and read the Book of Thoth. It was all there, and they had access to it. And so much of it's been lost. And our European worldview is stunted. It's causing damage to the earth on an untold scale. So I'm on a mission to kind of bring this forward, and to, you know, the Enneagram is the perfect vehicle through which to translate this ancient wisdom. Are there other ancient wisdom traditions? Yeah, of course there are. Fantastic ancient wisdom traditions around the world. My one is Egypt, because it's a very pure form. We have Egyptian hieroglyphs in the original. There are hardly any other traditions where you can go back, you can read the original text in the original language. It's not a copy, it's not been translated through other languages, it's there in the original. So we've got access to it. There's a lot more to it than is kind of the simplistic version that you'll read about in normal history books. You know, we're going to have to bring forward this wisdom, this knowledge, very, very soon as well. So, Anna Ujjab Sened, wishing you a life of prosperity and health. Just to finish, there's my, if you want to take a picture of that, and you've got any questions or any feedback or anything you'd like to know, then I'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Rob. And I mean, in terms of incorporating this wisdom into your work, can you tell us a little bit about your work? I know you do coaching, and you know.
So yeah, I'm a coach. I work in personal development coaching and Enneagram coaching. This is the tip of the iceberg. There's a huge amount of content which I'm bringing. I'm writing. Be creating a book, hopefully, maybe a course as well. So that's what I'm aiming forward towards, is a book and a course that brings all of this together. It's as I said, it's a work in progress, but it's just kind of hitting critical mass right now in terms of and also urgency with what's going on in the world right now.
And we were speaking about Pesedjet being a kind of mystery school, an Enneagram school that brings this wisdom in. Can you tell us more about that and how we sign up?
Yeah, well, for now, send me an email on my email address. But yeah, eventually it'll be a wisdom school, and bringing Egyptian teachings and other teachings as well. And teaching it's very important to me that it's three-centered teaching as well. So it's not teaching by the head; it's teaching in the head, the heart, and the body. Really important to integrate all three centers in the learning and the teaching and the experience of all of this.
Yes, and I know you recently trained with Marianne Gilbert, and you're really interested in the somatics of trauma, and so
yeah, the work that we've done together, the work that I did a week training with Marianne Gilbert in May, active, working in the body. There was one day I woke up on that retreat with Marianne Gilbert, and I was walking down to breakfast, and I just felt aligned in a way that I don't think I've felt for decades. There was an alignment, there was a clarity of mind, heart, and body, and they just felt I felt a presence that I hadn't felt for a very, very long time. And it was just getting up and going to breakfast. So that that was from activating the centers. And when I work with the hieroglyphs, you can feel both sides start to work. The left brain is the head center. What are we actually talking about when we talk about the heart center? Well, yeah, the heart is a pump, and yes, we have neurons here, but really, I think we're talking a lot about the right brain, as the heart center. And especially when you read Gilchrist, he makes that very clear that he's talking about compassion, he's talking about inclusion, he's talking about the whole over here on the right. That sounds to me a lot like heart-centered intelligence.
Yeah.
So there's some more work probably to do around that, but my hunch is that actually we're talking about left brain and right brain a lot when we're talking about head and heart. And then of course we've got to be grounded in the body. Without Mart, without the balance point there, everything goes into chaos, and we have no head center, we have no heart center.
Yeah.
This idea of Mart is so important to understand from an Enneagram perspective, and also from a personal and society perspective.
So wonderful. And also the right brain in McGilchrist and in like Donald Kalshed and writers like that is where our sense of identity is. So when our identity is traumatized, we can't heal our sense of self through the left brain, because it's deeply in our unconscious and in this embedded and attuned relational world. So we actually, when we heal, we're healing our relationship to everything, to ourselves and to the world that we live in and to each other. So
yeah, and the left brain is the individual side of the brain, the individualism, the separateness that we have right now. And yeah, it's lonely. It doesn't sit in context. That's what's so confusing to people that everyday people that they're asleep, and I feel lonely. I feel disconnected. I feel disconnected from myself. I feel disconnected from nature. I feel disconnected from other people. I feel disconnected from meaning. All of this is on the left brain. It's misuse of the left brain, or overuse of the left brain without context of the right brain.
yeah, that's so beautiful. The like deep contextual embeddedness of the right brain and the right hand side of the Enneagram, the heart center, the image center. That was the link I was making, image and identity. that
Yeah.
when it's healed, it's in total harmony and relationship with everything. There's none of the, in the heart center of the Enneagram, the sense of shame that arises from this connection. It's like such a deep healing of our bondedness with and being held, and the attunement between us.
I love it when musical language comes up.
Yeah.
It says so much, doesn't it?
It really does. And then there's a lot of scientific research. I mean, some of you on my courses will know that I make you start singing, but before I do that, I put up the neurophysiological evidence of when we sing, and particularly with other people, but when we hear ourselves sing, it has immune system benefits. So, you know, singing in the shower should be a prescription instead of antidepressants or whatever.
Well, it's impossible to sing if you're in threat response.
So it's like a biofeedback thing, as if
Yeah, you can only sing in relaxation response.
Interesting.
And singing is saying, I'm here. You're saying, I'm here and I want to be heard and I want to be seen. Can only be done,
Yeah.
It can only be done in safety.
Beautiful. And then in all the spiritual traditions, the chanting, I'm looking at Justine now, who's a yoga teacher. And yeah, I don't know if there's any Vedic teaching around chanting and voice and true voice and that, but it'd be really cool sometime to try and make connections. Is there anything that landed for you specifically from today, Justine, knowing like the world you're immersed in?
I must say I've been so honored to be here. I've just found it completely fascinating, and thank you. And I mean, the many things to think about. I mean, I was very much taken by the idea of being true of voice and what that means. And I mean, it feels like it needs a lot of deep thought. You know, it's not something you can just kick out a response to. But I know I work as a writer, you know, and I've often, most of my career, I've worked as a writer for hire. So, you know, you want to write a murder, you write a murder. They're paying you to write a murder, you'll write a murder. They're paying you to write a comedy, you'll roll out the jokes. And it's taken me a very, very long time in my life to only now start writing my stories that come from deep within me. And it's something that I've considered a lot these past couple of years. And what is your voice and what is the meaning of that? So I don't have any answers. I'm just saying that what you said today gave me a lot of food for thought, and I'm very grateful.
You're very welcome. Yeah, and of course, true voice, we were talking about the physical voice, but true voice could be equally in writing, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the other interesting thing is that, you know, as you start to mine your own being for the stories that you want to tell, I do think that this idea of symbology and dreams start to come to the surface. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And true voice is ma'aheru. So it's got that word ma, the balance, the harmony, the truth, the justice, all of that guiding principle of Egypt is there in that word for true voice.
Wow, thanks, Rob. It's just been.
I know when I'm in true voice, and I know when I'm not in true voice. You know, you just know, don't you? You know, words come out, you know, wrong, or you're talking about something that you don't really know about, or you're talking about something that you're not passionate or committed about, and there's just that awkwardness, isn't there? And then there are other times when you're here and you're present, and your voice is, you're breathing, and your voice is, it feels like you, and it feels like you're being authentic and real, and it's all coming through the voice.
And we
I think
picked up
it's
other people as well. Sorry, Justine,
Yeah.
go ahead.
sorry. No, I mean the quite alarming realization or thought that came to me was how most of the time I think I'm not true of voice, actually living and operating in the world. I mean, it's the truth. That's the truth.
I think a lot of people would echo that right now. It's difficult to be true of voice. It's in a lot of the contexts that we have to operate in. Seraphine's asked a question about martial songs in army training. Well, you could say that you're safe in that moment, that you're singing together and bonding with your with your compatriots, with your colleagues in the army. That's that. Anyway, that came up for me. But yeah, good comment and good question, by the way.
But thanks, Rob. That was absolutely amazing. And I hope you'll come back again to one of these and we can deepen some aspect of it or go into a little special stream, or maybe we do a whole thing about true of voice.
Yeah, I mean, that would be really interesting to do some exercises around true voice as well.
Or a workshop, like put together a little workshop for us on true of voice.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. I really appreciate it. If you've got any feedback or anything, let me know. And if you've got any questions, let me know. And yeah, hopefully see you again soon. And thank you for coming. Really appreciated having you here.
Thank you so much. It was amazing.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Cheers, Rob. Bye.